Some episodes explore fear through transformation, taking characters who feel stable and reshaping them in ways that challenge their sense of reality. Planet of the Jellyfish is one of the clearest examples. The story begins normally enough with SpongeBob and Patrick going jellyfishing at night. But the tone changes quickly when they encounter a strange jellyfish that behaves unlike any creature they have seen before. Its body pulses with an odd glow, and it moves with unnatural intent. When it captures SpongeBob's net and turns it into a living duplicate, the situation shifts from quirky to alarming. The creature is a mimic that replaces objects and eventually people, creating perfect copies that obey a hive mind. It is a concept straight out of science fiction horror, but the episode plays it with a surprising seriousness. As more duplicates appear, the sense of invasion grows. The duplicates speak in monotone voices and move stiffly, hinting at a lack of emotion or individuality. Their behavior suggests they are not merely clones, but extensions of the main creature. When one of the jellyfish imposters stares at Patrick with blank, unblinking eyes and repeats his name in a strange, unnatural tone, the moment becomes genuinely eerie. Soon, the entire town begins acting like controlled copies. The real Patrick is captured and replaced, leaving SpongeBob surrounded by a version of Bikini Bottom that feels familiar but wrong. The uncanny effect makes even friendly faces feel threatening. The episode taps into the fear of being the last real person in a world that has silently been taken over. Another episode that uses transformation as a source of dread is All That Glitters. This story revolves around SpongeBob's dependence on his spatula, which he treats almost like a living companion. When his beloved tool breaks, SpongeBob's grief is immediate and intense. He tries to replace it with new spatulas from a store, but none of them meet his emotional needs. He eventually buys a new high-tech spatula that turns hostile, slicing and whipping food with violent enthusiasm. This tool does not listen to SpongeBob and even causes accidents. SpongeBob realizes too late that his original spatula meant more to him than he understood. The disturbing moment comes when SpongeBob goes to retrieve his broken spatula from the hospital. The spatula lies in a hospital bed like a dying patient, covered in bandages, its metallic body dented and barely functional. The scene resembles visiting a loved one on life support. The imagery is bizarre, touching, and unsettling all at once. When SpongeBob cries over the spatula and begs it not to leave him, the emotional tone becomes almost too heavy for the setting. The spatula's sacrifice, shown through exaggerated medical symbolism, gives the story an odd sense of tragic seriousness. The combination of anthropomorphism, grief, and absurd medical procedures creates a tone that feels strangely somber for such a small incident. Another emotionally intense episode is Krabbyland. It starts with Mr. Krabs trying to attract children to the Krusty Krab with a fake advertisement for a theme park. The kids rush inside expecting fun, but get nothing but cheap decorations, false promises, and unsafe activities. Mr. Krabs has no intention of giving them what he advertised, and instead uses their excitement to profit from them. At first, the situation seems like typical Krabs greed, but things escalate when the children realize they have been scammed. Their anger shifts the tone rapidly. They become an aggressive mob, chasing Mr. Krabs through the restaurant like a vengeful swarm. Their cheerful faces twist into expressions of rage as they demand justice. The episode becomes unsettling because the children behave more like a violent horde than a group of disappointed kids. They lift and throw objects, menace Mr. Krabs, and tear apart the flimsy decorations he made. The intensity of their anger transforms the episode into something resembling a survival scenario, where Mr. Krabs must escape rather than simply apologize. The shift from playful chaos to threatening force highlights how quickly a crowd can turn dangerous when deceived, especially when their expectations are heightened and then crushed. The ending, where Mr. Krabs receives a brutal but deserved punishment, feels harsher than the usual comedic slapstick. Another episode with similarly dark emotional weight is A Flea in Her Dome. What begins as a simple flea infestation spirals into paranoia and desperation. SpongeBob and Patrick visit Sandy at her tree dome after she returns from vacation. A flea accidentally enters with them, and the infestation begins. The fleas bite relentlessly, leaving visible marks that grow more painful and numerous as the story progresses. Sandy becomes increasingly distressed as her home fills with crawling insects. The fleas reproduce rapidly, swarming across the dome, biting constantly. The atmosphere shifts from mild annoyance to full panic. The characters start losing control of their actions as the fleas overwhelm them. They scratch until their fur and skin redden. The sound of endless buzzing and biting wears down their sanity. When they try to escape, the fleas block their path, creating a terrifying wall of insects. Sandy's dome transforms from a cozy home into a claustrophobic nightmare. The fear does not come from gore, but from the inescapable nature of the invasion. The insects crawl everywhere, and every attempt at relief fails. By the time they flee the dome and escape to the ocean, their bodies are covered in bites, and their expressions show exhaustion and fear. The episode ends abruptly, offering little comfort after the overwhelming sensory assault. Another deeply uncomfortable episode is Face Freeze. The premise is simple. SpongeBob and Patrick are warned that if they keep making ridiculous faces, their expressions will get stuck permanently. They ignore the warning and push themselves to more extreme facial distortions. What begins as playful exaggeration quickly becomes disturbing as their faces contort into unnatural shapes. Their eyes bulge, their skin folds into grotesque wrinkles, and their mouths stretch far beyond what should be possible. The artwork becomes detailed to the point of discomfort, resembling horror caricatures more than cartoon silliness. When the warning finally comes true and their faces freeze into horrid expressions, the moment feels like a punishment for ignoring boundaries. The distorted, frozen faces linger in the viewer's memory, straddling the line between comedy and body horror. Another moment where bodily discomfort becomes the center of the episode is Squidward's illness in the episode Are You Happy Now? Throughout the story, Squidward grapples with a deep sense of emptiness, unable to remember a single genuinely happy moment in his life. As he falls deeper into despair, his appearance deteriorates. He stops eating, his skin pales, and his physical posture collapses. The scenes of him sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing, suggest a level of emotional suffering far beyond typical cartoon sadness. At one point, he isolates himself in his house for days, spiraling into a level of hopelessness that feels perilously close to psychological breakdown. The episode does not lean into jokes during these moments, but instead lets the bleakness sit uncomfortably. SpongeBob tries to help, but often makes things worse. His attempts to cheer Squidward up are frantic and misguided, pushing Squidward further into despair instead of lifting him out. The combination of emotional collapse and unintentional pressure creates an atmosphere that feels unusually real. For many viewers, the most disturbing part is not any specific scene, but the overall portrayal of profound loneliness and mental exhaustion. It is rare for a children's cartoon to show a character sinking into this level of hopelessness, and the seriousness of Squidward's condition makes the episode stand out as one of the darkest in the series. Even smaller moments can feel oddly unsettling when taken in context. In Slide Whistle Stooges, SpongeBob and Patrick use slide whistles to annoy Squidward, but their persistence pushes the situation beyond innocent play. The constant sound of slide whistles becomes a form of psychological torture, wearing down Squidward's patience until he snaps. The relentless repetition, paired with SpongeBob and Patrick's complete lack of awareness, creates a cycle of irritation that feels claustrophobic. While the episode is meant to be comedic, it unintentionally highlights how small annoyances, when repeated endlessly, can break a person's composure. These episodes, each in their own way, reveal how SpongeBob's world often blends humor with surprisingly intense themes. Whether through transformation, emotional collapse, or psychological pressure, the show repeatedly pushes past light-hearted comedy into something more complex and sometimes unsettling. Some of the most unsettling moments in the series come from episodes where characters lose their sense of safety in familiar environments. One striking example is Nightlight, where SpongeBob becomes obsessed with lights after reading a scary story. At first, his fear seems harmless, but it quickly grows into full paranoia. He fills his house with lamps, lanterns, flashlights, and glowing objects until every room blazes with light. The brightness becomes so intense that the interior of his house resembles a laboratory rather than a home. His fear escalates because each time he thinks he has enough light, he imagines new monsters lurking in the shadows. The show captures the spiraling nature of anxiety as SpongeBob keeps adding more lights, convinced that the darkness hides terrible creatures waiting to grab him. Patrick, influenced by SpongeBob's panic, begins to fear the dark as well. Their shared worry creates feedback between them, amplifying every small fear into something large and urgent. When the jellyfish and sea angels arrive, the situation becomes chaotic. SpongeBob mistakes the sea angels for the monsters from his book, confirming his imagined fears. His house becomes a chaotic battleground of clashing lights, flashing bulbs, and frantic running. The entire sequence plays like a descent into mania, driven by a fear that began with a single page of fiction. Another episode that leans heavily into fear is The Thing, where Squidward accidentally falls into a vat of cement, leaving him trapped inside a hardened shell. When SpongeBob and Patrick find him, they believe he is a monster. The episode uses this misunderstanding to highlight how quickly people can project terror onto something they do not understand. Squidward's attempts to communicate are muffled by the cement encasing him. His muffled cries sound monstrous, and his odd movements make him appear threatening. Instead of helping him, SpongeBob and Patrick treat him like a pet, restraining him and showing him off to others. Squidward's sense of identity is stripped away as he becomes an object of curiosity. The episode becomes disturbing when they keep him in a cage and bring him to a circus-like show where people gather to stare. Squidward, unable to speak clearly or move naturally, is treated as a spectacle rather than a victim. The moment captures a sense of helplessness rarely seen in the show. His suffering is ignored because the situation seems entertaining to others. The fear does not come from monsters or danger, but from losing autonomy and being misunderstood. When Squidward finally frees himself from the cement, it feels less like a comedic return to normal and more like escape from captivity. Another psychologically unsettling episode is SB-129, where Squidward becomes trapped in a time-freezing chamber and is thrust into different eras of existence. He moves through a futuristic world filled with clones of SpongeBob and Patrick, all smiling and speaking in repeating tones. The endless repetition of their cheerful voices creates an eerie, robotic atmosphere. Even though nothing physically threatens Squidward, the monotony and sterility of the future overwhelm him. The world feels empty, cold, and governed by a logic that excludes individuality. Squidward escapes only to tumble into a prehistoric era where SpongeBob and Patrick behave like feral creatures, grunting and striking him repeatedly. The contrast between the two extreme worlds leaves him shaken. The most haunting moment comes when Squidward falls into a void of pure white nothingness. He floats alone in an infinite empty space with no sound, no movement, and no direction. His voice echoes endlessly, and there is no sign of life except himself. The scene feels existential, showing a world where not even time exists. Squidward realizes that without others, even those who annoy him, existence becomes a torment. The episode ends with him desperate to return to his ordinary life, accepting the noise and chaos as preferable to emptiness. The depiction of infinite isolation resonates deeply, creating a sense of dread that lingers after the episode ends. Another deeply strange episode is To Love a Patty, where SpongeBob becomes obsessed with a Krabby Patty he makes. He treats it as if it were alive, giving it a name, singing to it, and taking it on a date. His attachment quickly becomes unhinged. He dresses it in clothes, speaks to it as if it can answer him, and grows jealous when others show interest in it. The episode turns disturbing when the patty begins to rot, its surface discoloring and sprouting mold. Instead of acknowledging the decay, SpongeBob refuses to accept reality. He clings to denial, pretending the patty is still perfect, even as it collapses in his hands. As the rot worsens, SpongeBob's romantic delusions intensify. He blocks out the smell, the texture, the discoloration, and the clear signs of decay. His insistence on maintaining the illusion highlights the fragility of his emotional stability. The final confrontation, where he is forced to see the patty as a spoiled slab of food rather than a companion, breaks his fantasy abruptly and violently. The mixture of obsession, denial, and sudden collapse creates a narrative that touches on unhealthy attachment and self-deception, making the episode memorable for its disturbing emotional climax. Another unsettling storyline appears in the algae's Always Greener. Plankton swaps lives with Mr. Krabs, using a machine that alters their identities. At first, the experience seems fun for Plankton, who enjoys the power and respect that come with Krabs' position. But the fantasy quickly crumbles when he realizes that living as Krabs comes with overwhelming responsibility, constant pressure, and difficult decisions. He is surrounded by customers who expect him to perform flawlessly, employees who rely on him for leadership, and a business that requires endless attention. The weight of these expectations crushes him. His cheerful dream becomes a nightmare because he is not built to handle the emotional strain of someone else's life. The most disturbing part is when Plankton sees how easily SpongeBob becomes emotionally attached to anyone who fills Krabs' role. SpongeBob hugs him, praises him, and expects kindness, none of which Plankton knows how to give. He becomes trapped in a role that demands emotional labor he is incapable of performing. The pressure forces him into a breakdown. When he finally switches lives back, the relief on his face is almost painful to watch. The episode reveals how identity is tied to responsibility, and how stepping into someone else's life can expose emotional weaknesses that remain hidden otherwise. Even episodes that seem silly on the surface often contain unsettling undertones. One small but memorable example is in Suds, where SpongeBob becomes sick and bubbles begin leaking from his pores. His body swells, trembles, and produces odd sounds. The illness worsens when Patrick interferes, insisting he can cure SpongeBob through bizarre and unhelpful methods. Patrick's treatments push SpongeBob into deeper discomfort. He forces SpongeBob to suck in air until he expands painfully, then tries rough physical techniques meant to stop the bubbles, but only cause more distress. The sense of helplessness rises as SpongeBob becomes too sick to resist. When SpongeBob finally visits the doctor, the treatment is immediate and effective, making Patrick's earlier attempts seem dangerously irresponsible. The contrast between medical care and Patrick's self-made remedies highlights the harms of ignorance. While the episode remains light enough for humor, the constant discomfort, feverish confusion, and misguided treatments create an atmosphere of distress that pushes the situation into darker territory. Another unexpectedly haunting moment appears in Dying for Pie, where SpongeBob unknowingly receives a pie that is actually a bomb. Squidward believes the pie will explode and kill SpongeBob by sunset. Instead of trying to prevent the situation, SpongeBob spends the day trying to show Squidward how much he appreciates him, unaware of the impending danger. Squidward becomes consumed with guilt, believing he is sharing a last day with someone who trusts him completely. The slow build of emotional pressure creates a level of tension unusual for the series. Scenes that should be cheerful become tragic because Squidward views each moment as a final memory. The emotional weight of watching someone enjoy their day while believing they are doomed is far more intense than the comedic explosion that finally ends the story. These episodes illustrate how the show often blends humor and fear, using absurdity to explore deeper anxieties. Even when the stakes are small, the emotional intensity can reach surprising depths. Some episodes rely on emotional dissonance, placing cheerful characters in situations that contrast so heavily with their usual tone that the result becomes strangely disturbing. Squidward, in Clarinetland, is trapped in a surreal world created from his own anxieties, illusions, and frustrations. It begins normally with SpongeBob trying to help Squidward improve his clarinet security. But once Squidward enters the locker to retrieve it, his reality fractures. The small space expands into a labyrinth filled with bizarre imagery. Floating instruments drift through the air, their bodies twisted or stretched, and distant whispers echo through the space, as if the chamber itself were alive. Squidward's journey through this strange world feels like wandering through a dream that has already become a nightmare. Doors lead to unexpected landscapes, hallways stretch on endlessly, and every exit seems to create two more behind it. The colors shift from vibrant to muted, as if the world is draining itself of energy. When a giant clarinet appears, its reeds snapping open like jaws, the moment suggests that even Squidward's greatest passion can turn against him. None of these events have explanations. The terror comes from the sudden break from reality and the helplessness of being trapped in a place shaped by one's fears, unable to escape until the world releases you. Another episode that plays with psychological discomfort is Suds, although it hides its darker tone under humor. SpongeBob becomes sick after staying outside in the cold too long, and the sickness manifests through his body leaking bubbles uncontrollably. What begins as a mild illness grows rapidly worse. His pores expel bubbles whenever he moves, and each sneeze launches him across the room. Despite being visibly ill, SpongeBob tries to convince himself he is fine because he fears missing work. His attempts to hide the symptoms resemble someone in denial about a worsening medical condition. The sight of him sweating, shaking, and barely able to stand gives the episode a layer of seriousness hidden beneath slapstick. When Patrick intervenes, the mood shifts from concern to chaotic danger. Patrick insists he knows how to treat the illness despite having no medical knowledge. His treatments involve increasingly absurd and harmful actions, causing SpongeBob's condition to deteriorate further. The sequence of Patrick forcing him through bizarre procedures is comical on the surface, yet it reflects a frightening truth about misguided help, making a problem more dangerous. By the time SpongeBob reaches the doctor, his symptoms have escalated to the point where he struggles to speak. The episode ends happily, but the underlying tension remains. SpongeBob nearly suffered serious harm because he trusted someone who had no idea what they were doing. Fear of losing bodily control reappears more dramatically in Not Normal. In this episode, SpongeBob, tired of being seen as strange, seeks help from Squidward on how to act more normal. Squidward coaches him to adopt stiff, robotic behavior. SpongeBob begins forcing himself to move in predetermined patterns, speak in calm monotone, and avoid anything that expresses creativity. Slowly, he becomes so normal that he loses the ability to express joy. His face freezes into polite smiles and neutral expressions. His voice becomes hollow, lacking its characteristic brightness. Even his movements stiffen until he resembles a programmed machine rather than a living creature. Patrick becomes terrified of what SpongeBob has become. The two once shared spontaneous adventures, but the new SpongeBob rejects everything that made him unique. The horror of this episode is subtle but powerful. It shows how suppressing everything that makes someone themselves can create a hollow shell rather than a better version. When SpongeBob finally snaps and reveals the emotional emptiness beneath his controlled exterior, the moment feels like a warning against forcing yourself into a mold that destroys your identity. Another deeply unsettling idea arrives in the paper, which starts with SpongeBob acquiring a simple piece of paper that fell from Squidward's trash. SpongeBob discovers endless joy in it, folding it into shapes, playing imaginary games, and creating music. Squidward, meanwhile, becomes progressively tortured by the sound of SpongeBob's laughter. As SpongeBob creates increasingly imaginative uses for the paper, Squidward sinks into frustration and envy. The paper becomes symbolic of creativity and freedom that Squidward desperately wants but cannot achieve. His descent into obsession becomes uncomfortable to watch. He offers trade after trade, sacrificing objects he treasures just to possess the sheet of paper. His desperation grows until he nearly breaks down. When SpongeBob finally gives Squidward the paper, Squidward eagerly tries to replicate the fun, but finds he cannot. The paper is just a paper to him. His inability to feel joy in something so simple highlights the deep emptiness he struggles with. The contrast between SpongeBob's childlike wonder and Squidward's inability to experience happiness gives the episode a quietly tragic undercurrent. Squidward's frustration reflects a kind of emotional paralysis that feels all too real. Episodes that explore fear of invasion continue in Nightlight, where SpongeBob's imagination transforms shadows into monsters. After reading a scary story, he becomes terrified of the dark. Every shape in his house becomes threatening, every shadow a lurking creature. To protect himself, he fills his home with so many night lights that Bikini Bottom begins to glow as bright as the surface world. The extreme lighting creates unnatural visuals, and the constant illumination attracts real deep-sea creatures. These creatures are drawn toward the glow and flood into Bikini Bottom in swarms. What makes the episode unsettling is the idea that SpongeBob's fear creates the very danger he wanted to avoid. His panic escalates until the entire town faces a threat because of one character's inability to face the dark. The fear is not rooted in monsters, but in how paranoia can grow until it begins affecting others. A more visceral horror appears in To Love a Patty. SpongeBob becomes obsessed with a Krabby Patty he cooked, treating it like a romantic partner. At first, he simply admires its appearance, but his infatuation deepens into something increasingly unhealthy. He takes the patty on dates, talks to it lovingly, and ignores everyone who warns him that something about this behavior is wrong. As time passes, the patty begins to decay. Mold forms on its surface, its edges darken, and its texture collapses. SpongeBob refuses to acknowledge the decay, convincing himself the patty still looks beautiful. The disturbing part is not the rotting food, but SpongeBob's complete detachment from reality. He clings to an idealized illusion while the truth becomes impossible to ignore. When the patty finally reveals its spoiled state fully, SpongeBob's shock comes too late. His attachment blinded him to something that should have been obvious. The episode leaves a lingering discomfort from watching a character fall so deeply into delusion. Fear of chasing perfection appears again in House Sit-In and Patnocchio, though in different forms. In House Sit-In, SpongeBob attempts to take care of Squidward's home and becomes consumed with paranoia about keeping it flawless. Every tiny accident becomes a crisis. His anxiety builds until he imagines catastrophic disasters for the smallest mistakes. In his panic, he causes more damage trying to fix imagined problems than if he had simply relaxed. The fear of ruining something important becomes a self-fulfilling problem, showing how anxiety can create the very failure one is terrified of. Patnocchio handles transformation differently. Patrick starts believing he is a robot because of a misunderstanding. As he tries to behave like a machine, his personality changes. He stops thinking for himself, imitates mechanical movements, and eventually falls into a cold, emotionless state. The psychological discomfort comes from watching Patrick shed his identity with increasing sincerity. His robotic persona becomes a prison that restricts his thoughts and actions. reflecting a deeper fear of losing oneself to an imposed identity. Across all these episodes, the show repeatedly touches themes of identity loss, fear of vulnerability, emotional collapse, and psychological distortion. Even when wrapped in comedy, these moments linger because they resonate with real human fears.